Welcome to the Vibes Lab, your front row seat to the science behind VIA, the Vibes AI agentic platform making everyday brain health accessible to all. Every episode is designed to reveal insights that will enhance your cognitive health and well-being. Follow us to grab your lab key and experience limitless intelligence.
All right, so today we're diving deep into sound therapy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
It is, and specifically, we're looking at this brain massage thing from Vibes AI.
Okay.
And they're claiming it's like a sonic spa treatment for your mind.
Interesting.
Yeah, using something called solfeggio frequencies, which we'll unpack a bit later.
Okay.
But I'm curious, what's your take on using sound to impact like our mental and physical state?
Well, it's fascinating, because sound is something that we usually experience passively.
Right.
But the idea here is that we can use specific frequencies to actively influence our well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Like turning up the volume on wellness, but instead of decibels, we're tweaking hertz.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's get into the specifics of this brain massage.
Okay.
Vibes AI is promoting these solfeggio frequencies, 417 hertz and 528 hertz. What is the deal with those?
Well, solfeggio frequencies are a set of tones that have been associated with various healing properties for centuries.
Wow.
Now, scientific research on their specific effects is still emerging, but there's definitely a growing interest in their potential.
Okay.
The brain massage is claiming to use these frequencies to create binaural beats.
Ooh, binaural beats. I've heard that term, but I'm not really sure what they are.
Yeah, it does sound kind of sci-fi, but the concept's pretty simple.
Okay.
Binaural beats happen when you listen to two slightly different frequencies, one in each ear.
Okay.
Your brain then perceives a third phantom frequency,
Wow.
the difference between the two.
So my brain's like doing math.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
So in this case, the brain massage is aiming for a 111 hertz binaural beat,
Okay.
which they claim can induce deep meditation.
So just by listening to these sounds, my brain is potentially unlocking a deeper state of relaxation.
Potentially, yeah.
I love it.
It's interesting stuff.
Sign me up. But
Yeah.
what about these specific frequencies, 417 hertz and 528 hertz? They have such cool names. The frequency of change and the miracle tone.
Yeah, I mean, it's very marketable.
Yeah, right?
So 417 hertz is associated with the sacral chakra,
Okay.
which is often linked to like creativity and emotional well-being.
Oh, interesting.
And Vibes AI suggests it can help cleanse this chakra, maybe even help us overcome negative thoughts or creative blocks.
Okay, that's really interesting because I've definitely experienced those creative ruts where it feels like my mind is just like,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any scientific basis for these claims about chakras, though?
That's where things get a bit tricky.
Okay.
While chakras are a core concept in like various ancient traditions, Western science is still catching up.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a ton of research on how sound frequencies might actually interact with chakras.
Okay, so we're kind of venturing into uncharted territory here.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's interesting, though.
Yeah, for sure.
So what about that miracle tone, 500 to 28 hertz? What's the supposed miracle?
Well, 528 hertz is connected to the solar plexus chakra,
Okay.
which is often associated with confidence and personal power. And some claim it can reduce stress boost energy even, and this is where it gets really wild, promote DNA repair.
Hold on, DNA repair.
Yeah.
I'm all for a good sonic boost.
Sure.
But is there any evidence to support these claims, or is this just clever marketing?
That's a great question. And to be honest, the scientific backing for some of these claims is still pretty thin.
Yeah.
While some preliminary studies suggest that certain frequencies might have an impact on brain activity, more research is definitely needed.
Okay.
We have to approach these claims with healthy skepticism.
You're right. It's important not to get swept away by the hype.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about this third element of the brain massage, the 40 hertz oscillation.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like this is where we move from relaxation to more of a cognitive focus.
Exactly. 40 hertz is in the gamma brainwave range,
Okay.
which is often associated with heightened focus memory and information processing.
So it's like a brain gym session, but with sound.
That's a great way to put it.
I like that.
This 40 hertz oscillation is designed to stimulate those gamma waves and potentially give your cognitive function a boost.
Okay, this is all super fascinating, but before we jump to conclusions about, like, sonic superpowers, we should probably look at the science behind all of this.
Absolutely. And that's where our deep dive gets really interesting. It's fascinating how this is like bridging ancient practices with modern science.
Yeah.
We've got these age-old ideas like chakras, and now we're looking at brainwave entrainment
Right.
and the effects of sound on our physiology. It's really cool.
It is like we're taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm still a bit skeptical about some of these claims,
Right.
like DNA repair.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what the research actually says.
Well, the source material did include some research links.
Right.
So we can definitely look at those.
Okay.
It's important to remember that scientific studies vary in their quality and scope.
Yeah, just because something's published in a scientific journal doesn't automatically make it true.
Right, exactly. We need to be critical readers
Yeah.
and consider things like the sample size methodology and whether the study has been replicated. And even if a study shows positive results, it doesn't mean that it applies to everyone or that the effects are long-lasting.
So it's kind of like we're putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
We're gathering all these pieces of information, but we need to see how they all fit together.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And sometimes we might find that certain pieces don't quite fit or there are gaps in the research.
Right. Okay, well, let's try to piece together what we can from the research
Okay.
on these solfeggio frequencies.
Mhm.
Vibes AI make specific claims about 417 hertz, cleansing the sacral chakra,
Okay.
and 528 hertz, aligning with the solar plexus chakra.
Right.
Can you kind of walk us through like what those are?
Yeah, so as we touched on earlier, chakras are these energy centers in the body.
Okay.
The sacral chakra is located in the lower abdomen,
Mm-hmm.
and it's associated with creativity, emotions, and relationships. And the solar plexus chakra is in the upper abdomen,
Okay.
and it's linked to confidence, self-esteem, and personal power.
Okay, so those are pretty fundamental aspects of well-being.
Yeah.
But how do these frequencies influence those chakras?
Right.
What does that research say?
Well, the research on this is still very limited.
Okay.
There haven't been any large-scale studies specifically on how solfeggio frequencies impact chakras.
Okay.
Some smaller studies have shown that certain frequencies can affect brainwave activity and mood,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a big leap to say that those changes are directly impacting specific chakras.
So it's more about exploring the potential connections and seeing where the evidence leads,
Exactly.
rather than making definitive statements.
We need to be cautious about overstating the scientific evidence.
Right. We don't want to give our listeners the impression that listening to a specific frequency is going to magically solve all their problems.
Right, or turn them into superheroes.
Exactly.
But it's also important to acknowledge that we still don't know a lot about the brain and the ways that sound can influence us.
That's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
It really is a blend of mystery, ancient wisdom, and cutting-edge science.
Totally. And even if some of these claims about specific frequencies and chakras are overblown,
Right.
there's still a growing amount of evidence that sound can be a powerful tool for things like relaxation, stress reduction, and cognitive enhancement.
Exactly. We don't need to prove that 528 hertz repairs DNA
Yeah.
to appreciate that listening to calming music can lower our stress levels.
Exactly. And that's an important takeaway for our listeners.
Right.
While it's great to be curious and explore these possibilities, it's also important to look at the evidence
Yeah,
and be mindful of the limitations of the research.
I think that's a good way to put it.
So we're encouraging our listeners to approach this with a balanced perspective.
Yes,
Open-mindedness, but also critical thinking.
that's the sweet spot for this and any other wellness trend.
Totally. So we talked about the frequencies and the chakras and all the science-y stuff. But I'm curious about the experience. Like, if I actually try this brain massage, what is it going to feel like?
Well, you won't find any research papers describing like a chakra cleansing experience.
Right.
But we can look at what Vibes AI says
Okay.
about their brain massage.
Yeah, they're the ones calling it a multidimensional brain massage.
Right.
So what are they saying it's going to do?
Well, their marketing stuff describes it as like a soothing, rejuvenating journey through sound frequencies.
Okay.
They say you might feel deep relaxation or mental clarity, even like a heightened emotional state.
Interesting.
Some people report tingling sensations or a sense of lightness.
It sounds kind of like meditation.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison.
Okay.
It makes sense, since binaural beats are meant to induce slower brainwave states, kind of like what you might experience in deep meditation.
So even if someone's not sure about the chakras or DNA repair stuff,
Yeah,
they might still find this brain massage useful for relaxing or focusing.
exactly. It depends what they're looking for. If they want a quick fix or a miracle cure, this probably isn't it.
Yeah.
But if they're open to new approaches to well-being and they like experimenting with sound, then I think it could be worth trying.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, even if it just helps me unwind after a long day, I'd be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of which, I'm sure our listeners are wondering where they can find these vibe drops,
Yeah.
including the brain massage.
Yeah, the source material mentions vibes. AI offers these experiences.
Okay.
So their website would be a good place to start.
Perfect. We'll include a link in the show notes.
Great.
And as always, we encourage our listeners to do their own research
Yes.
and see what works best for them.
Absolutely. Sound therapy is a personal journey.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another.
All right. Well, I think we've given everyone a pretty thorough look at this sonic brain massage.
Yeah.
We've covered the claims and the science and the possible benefits and even some of the ancient wisdom tied into it.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It really has. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay.
We've been talking about using sound to influence ourselves.
Right.
But what if we flip that around?
Okay.
What if we tune in to the sounds around us, not to change them, but to become more aware of our environment and ourselves?
That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in using sound to fix something,
Right.
but just listening, really paying attention to the sounds around us, that can be incredibly powerful too.
It's like a different kind of brain massage,
Yeah.
one that comes from just being present in the world.
Exactly. So to everyone listening, I encourage you to take a moment today and just listen.
Yeah.
Notice the sounds you might normally ignore. See if you can find something interesting or beautiful in the everyday soundscape.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining me on this sonic adventure.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our amazing listeners, thank you for tuning in to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time for another exploration. Until then, keep those ears open and those minds curious.